What makes good page content? Talked about this before. This is the only slide I'll use for this. It's quick and easy to read and skim. You should use lists. I'm assuming that your marketers have written the content, but you can at least still present it. Maybe present it a little bit more cleverly than they thought. It's unambiguous, clear, concise, and uses lay terms. Every page is self-contained and unassuming. It shouldn't assume that you've come from a different page or you're going to follow on to the next page. It answers the questions that your visitors ask. Okay? It's not just a pure push. It's, how can I help you? Let me tell you the ways. Okay? It's not broken up for any other reason to help a real person navigate it. Don't break a 1,000-word long article into 4 pages just to sell ads, because the relevancy of those words on each of those individual pages, Google's going to treat each of those pages individually, and as soon as their semantic parsers come online, the article's going to look incomplete. They're going to get to the end of page 1, it's going to dangle, they're going to say it's not a complete article, you're done. Okay? So don't break up your content just to sell ads, unless you don't care that that article could help you in Google. Obviously, there's always a trade-off. Okay? And a lot of people say that the ideal for SEO is a minimum of 300 words per page, 300 content words that excludes navigations, footers, legal disclaimers, whatever. And the whole point there being that it needs to have a chance to determine some relevancy as to whether this page would be useful for their visitors or not. Like I said, they don't owe you anything. They just want to show relevant pages. If you have more than 300 words, the odds are that they're going to be able to make a valid distinction between your page, what your page is about. And as soon as they know what your page is about, you've got a good chance of being shown to someone.
Is there a maximum number of words per page?
No.
Okay.
There is no maximum. I have heard about pages that are 10, 20,000 pages long, or 20,000 words long, or that have 30,000 links on them. They can still show up in Google's index. Obviously, they're probably going to prefer smaller pages, right? Because it's more likely to be what the user's looking for, and part of what they know about their users is that people on the internet don't read. So really long pages aren't automatically excluded from the results, but they probably aren't penalized, but they might not be preferential to something on the same topic that's shorter. So yeah, anything that Google can read, Google can index. Which comes right back to the whole point. Google can't read past JavaScript or Ajax, inside of Flash, past most frames, inside of password-protected PDF documents, inside of zip files, etc. So they can't index it. So if you want that index, you got to do something else. Any other questions? Yes?
Minor tangent.
Sure.
Google will index some Flash now. I've seen a concrete example. Not all of it, but I have seen that it did get some.
Yes. They're trying harder and harder because their whole goal is to give things to the users that they want to see. And some very valuable stuff is contained inside of Flash. That said, do you really want to trust that they're going to get the entire meaning out of your Flash file? Or worse, if you have multiple Flash files that download each other into them, however you structure your content, are they going to treat them as individual things and therefore dilute the relevancy of that as a single piece, even if the user would see it as a single piece? Questions you need to ask yourself. You always need to ask yourself those questions. But you're right, I have seen some Flash get indexed.
And it doesn't stand still. So going forward, the only thing you can be sure of is that it will be different.
True. SEO, yeah, you're right. SEO changes. Google makes 5 or 6 algorithmic changes, so people speculate, to their engine, to the way their rankings happen each week. Just last week, there was a huge uproar as a whole bunch of page ranks went down. Their traffic didn't go down, but people were too concerned with little green pixels in their toolbar and nearly flooded out the legitimate conversation in all the forums for about 10 or 15 days. All because Google made a change, and theoretically they were just trying something new and they might take it right back out tomorrow. It's always changing, which is why we're going after sustainable results rather than the quick black hat fix. Okay, so Code basics. This is probably where you want to know what you should and shouldn't do when you're marking up your page. Bold and strong implies importance. Use it sparingly. So does italics and emphasis, and bold is different from strong, and italics is different from emphasis. Learn them and use them right. This is where we get back to our whole semantic talk of eons ago. Some people say if you use more than 3 or 4% bold and italics, Google's going to think you're trying to scam them, and may or may not decide to index that page. Again, anecdotally, because they won't tell anybody how their internals work. But use it sparingly to be safe. Paragraphs should be wrapped in paragraph tags. You should use CSS correctly. You should avoid tables for layout because they break up the semantics of the meaning of the document. Not just because they look prettier, they have less code, etc. If it's laid out in a table and it's not tabular data, if it doesn't have a table caption, Google's going to have a harder time making sense of it rather than if you use CSS. Especially if you're putting paragraphs in a table just to position them. Keep the most important stuff at the start of the document if you can, and use CSS to position it for your users. Don't put your menu at the top unless you think your menu's at the top of your HTML document unless you think your menu's the most important thing. We'll get to that in a second as I beat up on Communitech a bit. If you can, your H1, which we'll get to in a second, should be the first thing after your body tag. Because it's probably the most important thing on your page. Because it describes a little bit about what your page is about. Then you should jump straight into your paragraphs full of content or your lists and things like that. If you've got sidebars and advertising, they should be marked up at the bottom. And if you can, use CSS to bring them back to the top, put them on the side, whatever. Okay? Again, ideal cases, you don't need to do all of this to be successful. You just need to do whatever you can. Every little bit helps. Well-structured code that ideally validates. We've had conversations galore in this group about whether validating is really worth the effort. If you can, it is worth some effort, but it's not the only thing you should put your time into. Validating helps because it makes Google more likely to understand the flow of your document. Obviously use alt tags and titles on images, maybe use height and width too. Use lists and text-based navigation rather than images. Any questions on the basics? Yes?
With the H1, H2 tags, should they be branding or should they be related to content?
We'll get to H tags specifically in a moment, but yes, they should be related to your content.